So as I said in the first part of the video, this guidance material isn't statutory. It has been put together by a wealth of expertise from various people, but whilst they are experts in their field, there are obviously other experts who have differing opinions. So we don't all have to agree on everything and the delivery of how we teach reading. And remember that this is a guidance document, it isn't statutory. However, it is being promoted as something that inspectors will be thinking about and considering when they come to look in your schools. And we know as teachers, we don't do what we do because of Ofsted. We do what we do for the love of the children who we teach. And whilst the experts who've written this document are incredible and have put together a really useful document, we have to also remember that there is no greater expert than ourselves in terms of the children that we teach, the children who are in our schools. So we also must have faith in our own ability to know that we choose the best practice based on the children that we know in our own cohorts and in our own schools. So today we're going to begin with looking at the section on assessment. I just want to point out something that I know there's been a little bit of confusion about various social media platforms about the fact that they have said it's not sufficient or necessary or desirable to assess reading comprehension in a summative way when children are just beginning to read. And the reason for that is children, when they're learning to read, all of their working memory is going on the actual skills of decoding, which is a really complex skill when the children are just starting out. So on page 64, it does say here, while children are learning to read, as most of their attention and working memory is directed on decoding the words, and other material written for them to practice reading are likely to be below the level of what they can actually understand, we don't need to focus on a summative assessment for assessing their comprehension. Basically what they're saying is when we are giving children decodable books, that is purely for the children to rehearse using their decoding skills. Therefore, when people are talking about the fact that decodable books don't give the children a storyline and the children are missing out on rich literature, remember that the purpose of those decodable books is to rehearse, apply their knowledge to the decoding skills. It's therefore our job to provide the children with a rich range of literature that we share and we read with the children so that we can assess their understanding and their comprehension, which will hopefully be far beyond what they're capable at that stage of reading independently. So don't misinterpret the fact that we don't need to assess their comprehension of the decodable books we don't need to assess comprehension anymore. We do, but we need to make sure that we are giving them the right level of book. So something a bit more challenging when we're reading to the children in order to develop their comprehension and their understanding skills. Okay, moving on from there. So once teachers are expert in teaching the school's chosen phonics programme, they can pay attention to the children's misconceptions and adjust the teaching minute by minute. So best practice, as we know, is not having beautiful plans spread out in front of you minute by minute of your phonics session, but knowing your phonics programme so well, so inside out, that when you do spot a teachable moment and you do spot something that the children need support with, you can adapt your planned route according to what the children need there and then. And that's why all of the teachers within our schools, and when I say teachers, I mean teaching assistants, one-to-ones, learning supports, I mean everybody, because we're all teaching the children. We all need to be experts in our chosen phonics programme, whether that be a published scheme or whether that be a scheme that your school have written yourselves. So that would be your formative assessment, informing what you are doing in the moment, assessing, teaching, learning. It's all that cycle that we have as good practitioners. Then the summative assessments might be termly or half-termly, but you need to decide that as a school, what you're going to do. It's up to the school to decide on the basis of the guidance in the phonics programme that they have chosen, and at what point they're going to collect the information, what is important, what you want to get from it, and what you want the children to then obviously get from the information that you've had. So all assessments should have a purpose. Check for gaps in children's knowledge. They should then provide further practice for the children in reading words with specific GPC gaps that they have not yet fully learned and using in their blending, for example. And individual records of progress must be kept, not group records. And the individual records are vital, particularly for those children who are at risk of falling behind, who are at risk of not meeting the expected standard for the phonics screening check and failing to learn to read. So that's all really good practice that hopefully most of us are already aware of. So then they talk about the phonics screening check here, that beloved screening check that we need to do in year 1. Teachers should not ask children to read lots of pseudo words in order to prepare them for the phonics screening check. Instead, the children should have many opportunities to practice their phonic knowledge, blending skills by reading words that they can't just read at a glance or by sight as part of being a fluent reader. Now, I've got 2 question marks there, in that we know as teachers that there's a huge pressure that we get as many children passing this phonics screening check as possible. And as an experienced teacher, the thing I find with the better readers is that when they are faced with these alien words in the phonics screening check, they are looking for a word that they know is real. If they haven't previously seen the layout of the test. So therefore, those children will be looking for a real word because they're such a good reader. And it's those children that I think it's necessary to show them the format of the paper. So I'm not saying becoming obsessed with the phonics screening check and showing them these pseudo words every lesson at all. Absolutely disagree with that. Don't think it's necessary. And as it says in this guidance, it should be about rehearsing words that we know they can't read, challenging words, multisyllabic words, longer words that they need to be able to blend. However, that said, I don't think it would be fair on children not to have seen that these alien words are basically not real words for those children who are good readers. And I think if you've been teaching for a long time, you will also know that those better readers are often look for a real word when they are faced with that phonics screening check. So I think it's only fair to familiarise the children with the layouts. The results from the screening check are not published at school level. However, Ofsted inspectors do use them alongside your school's policy for the teaching of reading, its assessments of phonics, and their observations of lessons when they come to inspect reading. So just bear in mind that the phonics screening check is part of what the inspectors will be looking at. Meeting the expected standard of the check does not mean that children are now readers. Many children may have read the words very slowly, even if they've met the expected standard, because speed is not a part of it. They can take as long as they like. They still need considerable practice in decoding lots of familiar words speedily and reading familiar words at a glance. And I said that at a glance quote is often mentioned sporadically throughout the guidance document. The standards and testing agencies say that there should be around 90 words per minute is a good indicator of when a child starts reading sufficiently fluently to focus on their understanding. However, it also says that some children might read more slowly than this while still being able to understand what they're reading. So I think it's really important to mention here that we shouldn't become obsessed with how many words a child can read in a minute, because I know lots of people who are brilliant readers, have a great comprehension, but they just read slowly. So I think it's important that this doesn't become an indicator of whether a child is a good reader or not, basing things on whether they can read quickly, fluently, to understand. That's not necessarily the case, and it's important there that we note that, I think. While children are learning to read, most of their attention is on the working memory and decoding words. So I mentioned that at the beginning, just to reiterate that that the decodable books are there to rehearse that decoding skill, so they still have a value. Yes, are not going to have the most interesting storyline, but they absolutely do have a purpose. They are also unlikely to be reading at speed that is sufficient for them to focus on the meaning of what is written on the page. With that I often think that it's, if a child is decoding a sentence and it's been a bit bitty because they've been maybe had 2 words within the sentence that they had to decode and blend, I would then get them to reread it for understanding. So I think it's important that we do incorporate some of that within our decodable practice too, because we want the children to understand what they're reading, even if it is a very simple sentence. What isn't necessary is for us to assess their reading comprehension in a summative way before they are reading fluently. That said, it's still important to give the children lots of books that are going to develop their ability to understand and comprehend what they've heard, but this is in a different book, a book that we will read to the children, a book that we will enjoy with the children. Okay, so now we're going to move on to those children who are at risk of reading failure. I just really hate that word. Every time I've read it, I feel a little bit like I'm going against what I believe in. Children at risk of reading failure. It just sounds awful. So yeah, that word is not mine. So we want the children to all keep up, and some children are going to need extra support right from the very beginning. It would be wrong to assume that all children are going to start off and they're just going to get it and everything's just going to click. We know that that is not the case. So some children do need extra support right from the beginning of their learning journey. And teachers working with others, if necessary, should investigate possible reasons for why they are not quite clicking. So when I have been a reception class teacher and a nursery practitioner as a nursery manager, I would always make sure that we ruled out certain things. So if some children were finding things difficult, I would also always make sure that the child's parents would go and get their hearing tested, get their eyes checked, think about speech and language issues to see whether this was affecting the children, because it's really important, if there are issues that need work, that we pinpoint those and work on those at the earliest possible opportunity. To enable children to keep up, they should be given extra practice, either in a small group or one-to-one, whether there is a specific reason found or not. And this is really important. So for me as a class teacher, I always deliver whole class teaching for as long as I possibly can before streaming or setting or whatever you want to call it. But for those children who I do want to keep up and make sure that they don't fall behind, they will have phonics groups or one-to-one sessions in addition to the whole class session. So they're still being exposed to what all of the other children are exposed to, but then they have that extra phonics session in addition to the whole class one. To enable children to keep up, they should be given extra practice either in a small group or one-to-one. As I've said, I think I've repeated that line there. It's an important one though. So they say it should take place in a quiet place at a regular time every day so that the children are familiar with the routine. So me personally, I always put phonics right at the start of the day, obviously, because it's the most important. And the children are awake and they're ready, and they know that it always comes first. So it should be a school priority with maximum efforts made to avoid disruption or cancellation. So whilst other subjects are obviously really important and crucial, we need to prioritise the teaching of this phonics to make sure that those early reading skills are embedded as early as possible so that they can then access the rest of the curriculum. So the other subject leaders will be shouting and throwing things at me now, but we know that reading is essential, it is the core, it is everything we do. Every subject we have coming from reading, it's developed from reading. They will be able to do better in all of those other subjects if the reading is where it should be. It should be provided by a well-trained adult, teacher, teaching assistant, one-to-one, LSA, all of those wonderful teachers that we have within our schools. They should all be well trained. It should be consistent throughout the school, absolutely consistent with the school's mainstream phonics programme. So everybody should be well trained and fluent in your phonics programme, and this should be delivered with consistency by everybody. It should include activities that secure the important phonic knowledge the children have grasped, and how we apply this to reading, writing and spelling. The emphasis should be on consolidating the work the children have already met in their main class or group phonics session. so that when the children are having their extra session, in addition to the whole class, you are revisiting, revising and rehearsing all of those key elements that you will teach in your whole class session with little bite-sized steps so that you give them a real feeling of success. The children have to feel successful, because otherwise they will become deflated and they won't enjoy it. So make sure that your bite-sized chunks, what you want them to achieve, is so little that they constantly feel like they're succeeding and moving forward. All the catch-up sessions should revise grapheme and phoneme correspondences. They should practice oral blending of spoken sounds to pronounce words, reading words by saying the sounds and blending them. So all of those really important phonics skills, that's what should be within those catch-up, keep-up sessions that you have in addition to your whole class teaching. So what about those older pupils who need to catch up? So after year one, learning in the wider curriculum does depend increasingly on literacy. So as I said, all those other subject leaders who are leaders of maths and science and history and geography, it's not to say that your subjects are not as important as reading and the teaching of phonics to be able to read. It's just that if we get that right, your subject will do better. They will do better in your subject. So pupils who do not read well enough do not have full access to the curriculum. They just don't. And those who fail to learn to read early are often the ones who don't like reading. And then that opportunity, that whole world of new learning is closed down to them because they have that difficulty and that blindness to reading and wanting to be able to read. So most of them will catch up if they receive a few months of intensive individual or small group teaching, and they should not need this extra support indefinitely. So if the support is quality and consistent with your synthetic phonics programme within your school, we should aim for those children to be off the scheme. Well, not off it, we're never off it, but we should aim for those children to no longer need that catch-up work. It shouldn't be something that they will just be on forever. And those with learning difficulties may need longer. So for some children, they'll be off it in a few months, and for some children, they will be on the catch-up programme longer. But every pupil within our schools needs to master the alphabetic code, whether they have a special educational need or not. And I mentioned that about those specialist SEND schools, that they are expecting you to be able to get these children to read just like they would in any other mainstream school. If pupils' reading is below what is expected for their age, it is important to determine whether they have that difficulty with word reading, language comprehension, or whether it's both of these, since different kinds of teaching will be needed for each. So you need to know whether it is that decoding and that blending that they're stuck with, or if it is the language comprehension. And for some children, it will be both, as they say. The school should use the phonics assessment in its chosen programme to identify the extent of the pupil's phonic knowledge and skills, and how to identify the exact gaps that they have. So it's no good just going back to the very beginning of the phonics scheme and just delivering it all from day one. You need to identify and hit those gaps so that it's only the gaps that you're addressing, and you're not almost wasting the child's time by going back to the very beginning when they potentially only have gaps here and there. Even pupils in the bottom right-hand quadrant of the simple view of reading, the little grid that I showed you last time, even pupils in that bottom right, which are those children who have poor decoding and poor language comprehension, whose decoding skills appear to be good, may not be able to read fluently enough to concentrate on comprehension and may benefit from extra phonics teaching. Sorry, I said that was those who were. It's not. It's those children who can read but have poor language comprehension, but they still may benefit from extra phonics teaching because they're not quite fluent enough. These pupils do not need something different from the others who are learning to read. They're very keen within this guidance that those children have the same alphabetic code knowledge and phonics skills that underpin reading using the same phonics scheme that you have chosen as a school. Providing catch-up teaching is vital, and we know that because we don't want to leave children behind, and we know that all children deserve to leave our school being confident, fluent and excited readers. However difficult it may be to organise the time, space and staff, it's the leadership and management who have to make sure that this is happening and we overcome any barriers and any reason as to why this may be difficult. It has to be delivered. The phonics programme a school chooses for catch-up provision, as for the beginner readers, should be an SSP programme. However, for older pupils who are still at the earliest stages of learning to read, the schools might want to avoid programmes that are specifically designed for younger children and consider those with age-appropriate lessons and materials. So I know, for example, in my school, the SSP programme I have written for our school, it follows on. It's the same phonics scheme, but we maybe don't use the actions the way that they do lower down the school. We have catch-up reading books that are different and look like they're for older children. So you need to make sure that you think about the age and the confidence and the self-esteem that the children who are still at this early stage of reading have. Teaching should happen in the same place and at the same time so that pupils know what's planned and do not have to cope with changes. Leaders may have to be creative in how they overcome this. Good reading is the only route to success at school, so leaders also have to overcome the concerns of teachers and parents that pupils are missing mainstream lessons. So as I say, because the teaching of reading is so important and the key to all the other subjects, we need to make sure that the parents understand that if those children who are in older year groups are then having to miss other mainstream subjects in order to do this catch-up reading, they must understand how important that is and how crucial that is, because the children really do need to learn to read. To continue to develop these pupils' language and vocab and encourage a love of reading, their class teachers should make sure that they listen to and discuss the same texts that their peers read in English lessons. So for those children who are in year 4, 5, 6 and struggling to read, they still need exposure to those rich whole class texts that you share with your children, maybe in whole class reading or English lessons. They still need to have that exposure as well as develop the rest of the phonics skills that they need to have. So now I'm going to go on to the leadership of management, and this will be for head teachers and English leads, but it's still relevant for you as teachers to know about so that you know what should be happening within your school. So head teachers are ultimately responsible for building the reading culture in their school and ensuring that the teaching of reading is as effective as possible. So head teachers are responsible for every teacher in their school understanding that the most important thing in their school, aside from children's well-being and love and happiness and all of that, aside from those things, is reading and being able to learn to read. So they have to make sure that all of their staff, including the special educational needs coordinator, their trainee teachers, have the knowledge, skills and understanding and professional support to teach reading effectively, so that children's life chances can be transformed. And that is what learning to read does for people. It opens the door and opens the opportunities for life. This requires all head teachers then to believe that all children can learn to read, regardless of their background, their needs, their abilities, and that we have this determination to make it happen, regardless of any barriers that are thrown in the way. It's head teachers who need to make sure that we adopt a rigorous and systematic programme that's well conceived, well structured and well resourced. And that doesn't have to be a board scheme, that can be one that you write and produce yourselves. Make sure all children make sufficient progress to meet their age-related expectations. We need to make sure as head teachers, I say we, I'm not a head teacher, but head teachers need to make sure that we build a team of expert teachers who know and understand the process that underpin learning to read and draw on expert training, practice and coaching to achieve this. So get someone who's really passionate, really inspired, really excited about the teaching of reading and phonics. Get those people into your school to really deliver the very best training to engage and excite all of you. And just as a little plug there, I do training for schools. I'm really excited to be delivering lots of training to so many schools, primary, secondary, nurseries. I'm there for you. So if you are interested in me delivering training that's created for your school and the situation you are in, then you can email me, thephonicsqueen@gmail.com, to find out all about that. Okay, so making sure that your staff are excited about phonics is something I would love to do. Head teachers need to ensure that the assessment is ongoing, is sufficiently frequent, and you identify those that fall behind at the very earliest opportunity so that you can provide targeted support to them as immediately as possible. We need to make sure that we are involving families so that there is this whole joined up approach, whole way that we are delivering this using the same language, the same strategies, so that we do give the children the very best chance of succeeding as quickly as they can. We need to make sure as head teachers that we teach phonics from the beginning of the reception year so that the children have the very best opportunity, and we develop a programme for reading aloud to children. Make story times essential part of your school day. We've timetabled it at our schools so that we have a reading for pleasure time within every class so that the children can sit and be immersed in listening to their teacher reading. Teachers have a responsibility to demonstrate their understanding of the SSP programme in their teaching, and trainees can learn from them about how to teach early reading effectively. So yes, head teachers are ultimately responsible, but us as teachers, we take that our professionalism very seriously. So we know that we want to take responsibility for our own understanding of SSP programme within our school. We need to make sure that we have the right time for teaching, and our timetables can become so jam-packed and overloaded that this is sometimes really difficult to do. So the daily timetable for reception year 1 should include a story time, at least one, more each day, if you ask me, a poetry and singing time, and I know lots of schools are collating brilliant poems that they want each year group to read, almost like a reading spine for poetry throughout their school, so that the children are exposed to a rich and varied poetry experience within their school. And then they have one or more phonics sessions a day, obviously, one or more a day, so that one whole class phonics session, and then any intervention, catch-up, keep-up programs that you're going to have every day. And then finding sufficient time to teach every child to read can be challenging, but head teachers have a duty to support teachers in making literacy a priority, absolute priority, and managing the rest of the curriculum realistically. So yes, we have all of these other elements that we want to include within our timetables each week, but head teachers have a duty to make sure that literacy is priority. Implementing an SSP programme. Implementation is a process rather than a single event. And I say this all the time. People say, you've written your own programme for your school. Yes, I have, but oh my goodness, it's constantly evolving. I'm constantly adding to it. It's constantly changing thanks to the feedback from the amazing teachers in my school. It's never going to be finished, because if it was finished, that means it's the best it can be. And I want it to constantly get better and better and better. So the implementation is a process rather than a single event. It's the responsibility of school leaders to ensure that the teaching of reading is as effective as possible, and that your SSP programme is implemented successfully, because different schools or even teachers within the same school using the same SSP can get different results. So we need to make sure that we are ensuring that the teachers within our school are delivering our phonics programme the very, very best that they can. And we need to monitor this as leaders, subject leaders and head teachers. As Ofsted have noted, that compliance to your SSP programme does not always guarantee effectiveness if one teacher is delivering it with passion and true understanding and another teacher's a bit about it. So we know we have to make sure that we monitor and make sure that every child gets the very best deal. Head teachers are responsible for investing in the best teachers, the best teaching assistants, and that they can find, and making sure that they train them and retrain them to teach phonics over and over and over again. So one training session is not enough. We constantly need to come back to it, revisit it and rehearse it together to ensure that we have that consistency and we haven't gone off on a tangent because we saw something on Instagram. So this section describes the implementation of the full SSP programme, and such programmes used by schools should provide. So this quote here: all that is essential to teaching your SSP to children in reception and Key Stage 1 years of mainstream primary schools up to or beyond the standards expected by the national curriculum, and provide sufficient support for them to become fluent readers. So schools that have developed their own SSP programme should ensure they provide what is described above. So do you have all of those things in your SSP programme? Are the children doing well? If so, fabulous. The programme should achieve excellent outcomes for all pupils, including those from disadvantaged backgrounds. As literacy need, head teachers should appoint a literacy lead or a reading lead. Some schools have broken it up into chunks. Someone to manage the teaching of phonics, reading and writing, and that person should become an expert in the school's chosen phonics programme. But not only that, that person should be really passionate and really excited about their role. If they love teaching phonics, if they love supporting other people teaching phonics, then those children within that school and those teachers will feel more empowered, and it will be all just fabulous. So together, the head teacher and the literacy lead should agree on the detail of their roles, their expectations of assessment and the progress for each age group. They should be involved in the timetabling of phonics reading and writing sessions and story times. They should have the best organisation of teaching spaces and resources, extra practice for the children who make the slowest progress, systems in place to tackle any poor attendance and punctuality, especially for those children who need the most support, a timetable for practice and coaching of teaching staff. So how are you going to ensure that you support the staff in teaching of phonics, the systems for staff cover, and how they will help parents in with the helping their child to learn to read as well. So effective professional development, what should you be expecting? So practicing together as a staff needs to be regularly in place. So as I say, not just a one-off situation. And it will build consistency and accountability, and everyone teaches reading in the same way. Sessions, I put my teeth back in, sessions should be ring-fenced and not subsumed into staff meetings. So they really need to have that important place within the school year so that everybody attends and everybody knows that this is a really important meeting that they have to attend. The most basic activities should be practiced first, in particular those that will support the GPCs and that will make the biggest difference and biggest impact straight away. And practice should focus on the activities that will make the biggest difference, as I say, so that all of your staff can deliver the very basics in the best possible way. The literacy lead should start by coaching teachers who are teaching the children who need the most support. So you need to prioritise the staff that you are going to be working with first. Ofsted reported that the best of the products available to teachers for teaching systematic synthetic phonics was so well structured as to take away the burden out of planning. Within my SSP programme, we have the structure of which phonemes are going to be taught when children are tracked, the natural progression that's going through the school. We have intervention programs that are written with the plans, an exemplar plan, but it's not so prescriptive that someone can just pick it up and follow it verbatim, because every child is different, and the child A who is struggling and child B who are struggling, they're not going to have the same gaps. So there is no possible way that you could be that prescriptive that you could just pick it up and deliver for child A and child B and it would be successful for both. So we need to make sure, in my opinion, that we plan something with child A in mind. We plan something with child B in mind. And yes, planning may be seen as a burden by this guidance document, but it's an essential part to make sure that the children get the very best that they can. So whilst people who write plans upon plans upon plans upon plans and then sell those on as a planning scheme, is that going to work for every child? What about those children who are on catch-up programs? Are they all going to go through the same journey? My opinion is no. So I don't have a prescriptive plan that I give to every member of staff with every weekly plan planned out, because every cohort is different, every child is different. And for me, best practice is taking into account the children that you are actually coming into contact with. Okay, so building on from foundations, with older children. So with a strong start in reception in year 1, pupils' word reading and spelling rapidly becomes more accurate and automatic. Teachers can then spend more time developing pupils' reading comprehension and writing composition. They should continue to read aloud to pupils every day to enhance their enjoyment of literature, increasing their vocabulary and developing their language comprehension. I think that's all very true. Pupils should read often in English lessons and across the curriculum to learn from their reading, to read for pleasure and for specific purposes. And with practice, they will become fluent. And since fluency is important for comprehension, this will make sure that they do better. So we need to make sure that children have a real purpose and understanding that you can just read for pleasure, to unwind and to relax. You can learn from your reading, you can research and use it for a specific purpose. So reading has a wealth of reasons for why we need to do it. When we can form letters correctly and easily, they should be taught how to join them and should practice their handwriting to increase its fluency, legibility and quality. So here we're making sure that children from reception don't need to have those leads to be able to join. They actually just need good hand-eye coordination, they need good control, they need good understanding of how to form the letters correctly. And then once that is in place, their sizing is good and consistent, then we can start to teach the children how to join. Grammar and punctuation become more important in teaching writing as pupils' spelling and handwriting improves. So sentence dictation that includes the words pupils have been taught to spell is effective in helping them to consolidate spelling, handwriting and punctuation. So rather than having to think about the composition of something they want to write, if you give the children a dictated sentence, they then can focus all their working memory on developing their spelling, handwriting and punctuation rather than that extra task of what am I going to write. So dictation is a very powerful tool to use with those children, building on from the very basics. So before I go on to the appendices and the useful bits within that, I just want to say I hope you found that run through useful. Everybody's entitled to their own opinion, and that's just my opinion of how I've interpreted the guidance. Obviously, it's been created by a wealth of people who have lots of experience and lots of expertise. That doesn't mean we have to ignore our own experience and our own expertise. So hopefully now you will feel confident to go through that information, go through that guidance with your school in mind, with your children in mind, and you are able to digest it and think about what's best practice for your school. This is guidance, it's not statutory. So all we need to think about, the statutory part, is we want all of our children to leave school feeling confident, fluent, and with a real love of reading, so that the doors are open for any avenue they wish to go down. Before I go on to the appendices, I just want to say that I do deliver training for schools. I've delivered training for nurseries, primary, secondary schools, and I absolutely love to do so. I am still a class teacher. I am still an English lead. So I will be delivering training just 2 days a week, either on a Wednesday or a Thursday. That can be during the school day or after school as a part of your staff meeting or a twilight session. I also deliver training as part of your inset day, if you wish. At the moment, it is all via Zoom, but I've delivered it and it's been incredibly successful, and people have been able to access it from all over the world, actually. So it's going incredibly well, and I really love doing it. I've had brilliant feedback. And the reason I want to make sure that this inspirational training is accessible for all, so that every child gets the best teaching that they possibly can. All training is delivered with your school in mind. So the information that you have in terms of your current situation, the expertise you have, the areas for support you need, all of that is thought about and when I write the training. So if you are interested in that training, please email me, thephonicqueen@gmail.com. Okay, so now on to the appendices. It's rather a chunky appendices, and whilst there is potentially some useful information for you if you are a very new trainee, I think some of it is far too prescriptive. The bit I'm going to talk to you about is Appendix 3, I think, yes, preparing to read. So it tells you what sort of seat to sit in. The teacher should sit in a low chair so that all children can see the book easily and make sure that everyone is comfortable. Now, that's not always the case, because sometimes you might be reading with a group of children who are sitting on a lovely reading sofa and you're all having a cuddle and sharing the book together. Or it might be that you are standing up and looking at a book because it's on a reading stand and you're all stood there together. Being that prescriptive is really quite dangerous, in that if a teacher who's very new and literally is taking all of this information and thinking, oh, I must only read a book if I'm sitting in a low chair, it's all really quite dangerous. Maybe you're all going to be lying on your tummy on the carpet with all the teddy bears and they want to hear you read a story then. I think this prescriptive guidance is worrying, as I've said before, about other over-prescriptive things. It also tells you what voices to use. As a narrator, you should use a neutral voice that won't detract from the character's voices, or a voice that gives away what the narrator is thinking. Again, I think it's so dangerous, and we have to have faith that these people who are embarking on their career as a teacher who really wants to make a difference should not be made to feel that this is the only way that you can read a story, how to pause. I mean, I think it's really dangerous having that kind of prescriptive information within a guidance document aimed at newly qualified teachers. There's other information in there, like phonetic language that you need to have, and such audit materials, advice on how you can talk to parents about phonics, that kind of thing. The one thing I do want to draw attention to is Appendix 7, page 93, and I'm going to read it out because it's something I've been saying for a really long time, since the validation guidance came out. It feels like forever. It is not mandatory for schools to use a programme from the DFE's list. Schools that choose to develop their own SSP programme or choose a programme that's not been validated should ensure that their programme meets the guidance on good SSP teaching in this document. They are advised to read these pages closely to consider how the ideas can be reflected on their own practice. So, for all the scaremongering that's been going on, we do not have to buy from the validated list, and we can create our own programme. It does talk to you about costs, general information, training, groupings, resources. All of that information is in Appendix 7, and it talks to you about the letters and sounds. It's got audit materials and all sorts of information in there, but that paragraph, it needs to be noted. And if you're somebody who doesn't believe it until you've read it yourself, go to page 93 in this document, and it will tell you all about the fact that it's not mandatory to buy from the validated list. I hope you find that useful. Thank you so much for all the wonderful comments. I do this to support people. It does take up a lot of time, but when you tell me that you find it useful, it does make it all worthwhile. I would love to deliver training for you. If you are interested, please get in touch. And for those people who are still asking about whether or not my book is available, yes, it absolutely is. There are plenty to go around. And as soon as I do run out of books, I will be getting more printed. So if you are interested in purchasing the book or booking some training, all queries just come to thephonicsqueen@gmail.com. Enjoy the rest of your holiday. I will be producing one more video before we go back in September, and it will be, in fact, I'm going to tell you, it's a surprise. So keep an eye on the page, and I will see you all soon. Bye.